following program is sponsored by Mike Gray with Morris Williams Realty. Views and opinions expressed are not those of this station, its owners, staff, or management. Now, the Golden State Report with Mike, Amy, and Dave.
Welcome, everybody. You are listening to the Golden State Report, heard every week on AM 1380. I'm Mike Gray with Morris Williams Realty. So happy that you have tuned in today. I hope that everybody had a wonderful, wonderful holiday week. And here we are moving toward the next holiday. In the studio with me is Amy Debusk from American Pacific Mortgage.
Yes, happy holidays, everyone.
Yes, it's a great time of the year. I love this time of year.
I do too.
It's festive and it's joyous, and although it gets dark too early.
That is one thing I don't like either. I was just noticing that last week. I'm like, why am I feeling a little down?
I'm really light sensitive, so when it gets dark, it's time to go to bed.
I think it's the Midwestern in us.
It could be. It could be. I know one night last week, I thought, oh, wow, it has to be 8:30, quarter to 9. It was 6:15. I still had to stay up for another couple hours. Otherwise, I wake up in the middle of the night.
Yep. This is the darkest time of the year. But if you wake up early, that sun is out much earlier now.
Yeah, it is. That's nice because I always feed our animals early. And so wait till the sunlight. So, yeah, that's nice. Anyway, this is where our listeners tune in. We try to give them some of the latest news as it pertains to the Sacramento Valley real estate market. And I want to use this first segment to talk about something that has made national headlines for real estate the last couple of weeks.
Yes, it's been the talk of the town.
Yes, if you haven't heard about it, there was a major antitrust lawsuit filed against the National Association of Realtors.
That's a class action lawsuit, correct?
It was filed in Missouri, and it's been working its way through that court for about 2 years. And about 2.5 weeks ago, the jury came to a verdict, and they found that the National Association of Realtors had indeed violated, in their opinion, of the antitrust laws. And there was a big settlement, for a bunch of buyers and sellers in Missouri who had filed a lawsuit against several major real estate firms and the National Association of Realtors. Now, this is being appealed. Appeals will take 2 to 3 years, so we don't know for sure exactly how this is going to flesh out. But there was a lawsuit that was ruled against the realtors and in favor of the buyers and sellers at that time in Missouri. Has ramifications for real estate all across the country.
Right. And so, there's a lot of speculation going on as to, how it is going to affect real estate as we know it going forward. And I know that you went to a meeting last week with some attorneys and really got down to a deep dive of what this could look like for all of us. And, to what's the moral of the story? Well,
the essence is the buyers and sellers in Missouri who brought the lawsuit felt that they had been misled and that the MLSs, the multiple listing services, and the realtors in their area were pretty much price-fixing commissions.
So, and this was both the buyers and the sellers?
Yeah, buyers and sellers were both listed as plaintiffs in the thing. And I think it really came down to poor communication. There were sellers who said, hey, we had no idea, even after we sold the house, that the commission, part of it went to the buyer's agent. We had no idea we were paying the buyer's agent's commission. And then the buyers who had joined the lawsuit said, after we bought the house, we found out later that the sellers had paid my agent. So really, who was my agent working for? Is he working for me, who I'm trying to buy the house, or was he or she working for the seller who was paying him money to bring a buyer to the table?
But even though on the closing statement, it clearly states that the commissions are coming from the seller's side of the money.
Well, it may clearly state it, but sometimes people don't read all the documents as clearly as they should. And I think, the bottom line is that there's really poor communications. When I take a listing agreement, the first things I talk to a seller about is, commissions are negotiable. Right. And this is what I charge. You can find other firms out there that will charge more. You can find other firms out there that will charge less. But this is what I charge. And if they ask me why, I'll explain to them what I think, why the value is there, my experience, my knowledge, and my success rate in having escrows close, and the fact that they can trust me. I tried to build that relationship. When I work with buyers, and oftentimes buyers will say, well, Mike, how do you get paid? And I say, I get paid from the proceeds of the sale. So in essence, the seller will end up paying my commission. Well, does that mean you're working for the seller? No, it means I'm working for you, and you have to trust me on that. All right. But I said we can change this. I mean, you can pay me if you prefer, and not have the seller pay me. But then you're going to have more money out of your pocket. And so if there's a high degree of trust level, the buyers are going to say, no, we'll have somebody else pay you as long as we believe you're looking out for our best interests.
Right. Most buyers appreciate the fact that the proceeds from the seller is how the agents get paid.
Correct. But if you don't tell the buyers, and often people only buy a house maybe once a decade, once every 6 years. Some people buy a house once in their life.
Right.
And they live in it for a long time. So they're not really accustomed to how this procedure works. For example, in the Sacramento Valley, we belong to the Metro List listing service. So when I list a house, my commission is 2.5%. But I'll tell the seller, then we're also going to pay another 2.5%, and that's going to go to the buyer's broker for the buyer's agent. And sometimes they say, well, will you do it for less? And then I say no, but that doesn't mean you can always interview other realtors, and I won't take offense by that.
And then the seller will ask you as well, well, how much should we pay a potential buyer's agent for bringing in the buyer?
I am very clear about it. I say, if your house is listed for $500,000, okay, and we sell it for $500,000, $12,500 will go to my broker, and $12,500 will go to the buyer's agent's broker. I don't know for sure how much what that commission split is going to be to that agent, because that's between the broker and that agent. I know what my commission split is going to be. So if you pay my broker $12,500, I know what's going to come exactly to me. And they say, well, would you do it for less? I said, well, that's a fair question, because commissions are negotiable, but I don't. And this is why, and this is the value that I bring to the table. Only you can determine if that value is worth that. And, we have a discussion about it. And that's what evidently was missing in a lot of real estate transactions.
Well, I think that, communication is not always the best in every industry, but especially our industry. And I think the communication and the conversation around commissions can be a very uncomfortable conversation for a lot of realtors. So I could see where that could be skated over.
Yeah, and there are a lot of average realtors out there.
Yes.
Okay. And, I try to, I put a great deal of pride in the integrity and the morality of my business and how I treat people. And I make sure that I've learned a long time ago, just have this discussion up front. And, they have the right to interview another realtor. They have the right to try to negotiate whatever that commission might be. And oftentimes they say, well, can we pay the other buyer's agent less commission? Yes, you can. And that's what we'll offer at MLS. But, in order to attract the highest number of buyers, this is kind of what I would recommend. Well, evidently the court and the jury thought that was price fixing. And I don't necessarily agree with that verdict, but, I wasn't there for the entire case, and I don't know all the facts that were presented to that jury and how they were presented. But the jury came back after 4 hours. It was a pretty quick elimination, and said, no, the National Association of Realtors and Metro List are price fixing. Communication is too poor, and they're
basically setting the price without giving the clients the option to pay less.
Correct.
To a potential buyer's agent or a potential seller's agent.
Right. So there's going to be some ramifications. This ruling is definitely going to change some things in our industry, probably for the best, but because it's going to lead to improved communication, which is always the bottom line. But it could have different effects.
So best case scenario, you think what is going to happen?
There's going to be more forms for everybody to sign, and the forms are going to be much more detailed in how commissions are paid, who's paying what, and how that all kind of fleshes out. Now, here's the problem with more forms. Very rarely do any of my sellers or my buyers read the forms. They're legalese stuff, and right now there's probably 60 to 80 pages of forms for any real estate transaction, in addition to the purchase agreement, which is almost 15 pages long. And so I add some more forms. They're just going to look at it and say, tell me what it means.
Right, exactly.
And then show me where to sign.
Again, they're looking to you, the expert, to explain what those forms are. That's why they hire a realtor in the first place.
Right. But I see my producer saying I need a break. We'll continue this discussion right after this break. But if you have any questions about this, you can give me a call. 530-431-8586. Again, 530-431-8586. We're going to continue this discussion right after the break. Please stay tuned.
Trees of Greenland, red roses too.
For all your real estate, financing, and investing questions, call the show's off-air number and speak with Mike Gray directly. 530-431-8586. That's 530-431-8586. Now, the Golden State Report with Mike, Amy, and Dave.
Welcome back, everybody. You are listening to the Golden State Report, heard every week on AM 1380. I'm Mike Gray with Morris Williams Realty. David Stone is out sick today, so he's not part of our show this week, but I do have Amy Debusk of American Pacific Mortgage.
Well, hello, Mike, and everybody out there listening to our show today.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to continue that discussion we had from the first segment.
Yes, very heated discussion on the Realtor class action lawsuit.
Yep, that existed in Missouri, and we're seeing other class action suits filed in different states across the country on the heels, of that verdict coming down. And you asked me what the best case scenario was going to be, and more forms.
Right.
Really explaining to sellers and buyers who pays for what, and that on the existing model, the seller pays both of the agent's commission, although the buyer's agent is representing and has a fiduciary duty to the buyer.
Right.
But there could be a conflict there internally if who's really paying the bill.
Right, and I get that. Now that you're explaining it, because we've talked about this several times in the last few weeks. However, it makes sense that the proceeds from the bulk of the money is the bulk of the money is coming from the seller,
from the sale of the house.
From the sale of the house. Mm-hmm. So we've got all this equity, and that's why it's always been that way, because it just makes sense that that the proceeds would come from the seller's side.
So what's the worst case scenario?
Yeah, what is the worst case scenario? This is a scenario, and I'm such an optimist. When you told me this last week, I was so upset.
Well, I said my business model might change and might change quite drastically,
right?
Which would also affect your business model.
Yes, it would.
Okay,
it would affect everybody.
Worst case scenario: the court issues an injunction saying sellers cannot pay the buyer's agent.
Because they are not hiring the buyer's agent to represent the buyer.
So that way, when I take a listing agreement, and I'm saying, helping sell your house, I say I charge 2.5%, and that would be the deal between you and I.
Right.
And so out of the proceeds, you'd save 2.5% because you're no longer paying the buyer's agent. So who's paying the buyer's agent? The buyer. All right. That's how the new model would work if the injunction comes out where sellers cannot be part of the compensation for the buyer's agent. Then the buyers have to pay the buyer's agent. Again, those commissions are negotiable. And so if you're selling the house, you're going to say whatever, I always use a 50-50 split. Whatever I make, the other agent makes. All right, even if I do most of the work, and that has happened before, by the way.
Well, why wouldn't the buyer then just go to the listing agent and say, okay, I want you to represent me as well?
It's legal in California. That's called dual agency, where one agent represents both the sellers and the buyers. In my opinion, that's a trap, waiting for litigation after the close of sale. Because when I represent the seller, my job is to make sure as much money as I can slides to the seller's side of the table. When I represent the buyer, my job is to make sure that the buyer can pay, as least possible amount, must keep as much money on his side of the table. So in dual agency, where do I slide the money to?
So, have you represented both buyer and seller in the past?
Well, I've been doing this for over 2 decades, and yes, I have done it probably maybe half a dozen times in 20 years, but I have 2 things that have to happen.
Okay, right? What are they?
Well, here's how it happened. I have a really good relationship with the seller. Seller trusts me. And I have this discussion, by the way, when I take the listing. So then I have buyers who say, well, I'll buy a house, Mike, but I only trust you, all right? So I want you to help me buy a house. And I said, well, it's my listing, and that's dual agency. Well, I'll only buy it if I can use you because I trust what you do. I said, well, 2 things have to happen first. The seller has to say yes. I have to go back to the seller and say, I have a buyer, and he only will make an offer if I represent him. I've encouraged him. I said, use another agent. The agent, the new buyer, and I have built a relationship before, and again, it's about trust. Okay? The second thing that has to happen, there is absolutely no negotiation on anything monetary. So let's say that the seller wants $799. If the buyer wants to offer $789, I cannot represent the buyer. If the buyer says, I'll give them what they want, and I'm not going to ask for any repairs. Okay, so there's no negotiations on the price, and there's no negotiations on repair. So I go back to the seller saying they're going to give you what you want, and they're not going to ask for any repairs. So there's no financial negotiations that I am aware of as if you say yes to this. So do you want me to, or do you want me to tell them to go find another agent or find another house? And 6 times the seller said, no, we trust you. You know, you're fair. Go back to the buyer and said, the seller says, yes, we can do this. But you can't negotiate the price. And you
so whatever it's listed at,
that's what we're offering.
And it's as is.
And it's as is. You still have the right to do an inspection, and you have the right to cancel. I'm not taking any of that away from you. And I'll walk you through all those things. And I will do my best to be fair and honest to both parties. You know, but there can be no financial, negotiations. Otherwise, I cannot do it. So those are the 2 rules that I have. Seller has to say yes.
Okay.
And the buyers have to be okay with it. So both parties have to say yes, and there can be no negotiations on finances.
And that's very ethical, Mike. And that's, you are probably one of the most ethical people that I have ever met. And then I would have to say that not all other realtors are going to be that ethical,
Well, let's just take this year, for example. It's a light year for real estate commissions. 2023 has been, I did not meet what my business model said I was going to meet. It's just because we had a lot of things factored into it, and my income isn't what I projected it to be. Well, I've done this long enough. I have money put aside, and I'll be fine. It is what it is. But there are realtors who have mortgage bills that are late, car payments that are late, and stuff. And so, if they have a deal going, and it looks like, well, if I tell the buyers that they may not really want to buy the house, I don't know if we can be able to negotiate that away, and this deal may go south. That should not be the realtor's concern. But yet, if the realtor is having financial pressure behind him because he hasn't made a lot of money, I have seen that happen where realtors maybe didn't give the advice that they should, to whoever their client is because they really needed this deal to close.
Right.
And that's kind of a unwritten, unseen pressure, behind all real estate transactions. If it does not close, I don't get paid. That's as simple as that.
Nobody gets paid in our world unless it closes. Now, okay, so we walk down this road and the buyer now has to pay for their own realtor commissions.
And commissions are negotiable.
Another scenario is that the seller would just give them a credit to cover their buyer's commissions.
But lenders have limits on the amount of credits that sellers can give buyers.
Right. So, on a cash deal, that works. Perfect. But that poses a whole nother set of problems. If the seller is giving a 2.5% credit to cover the buyer's agent commissions, well, on a conventional loan, the maximum credit is 3%. So that means that if there's any repairs that need to be done, typically when we have repairs in a real estate transaction, the seller does not go out and do the repairs or hire to get the repairs done by the close of escrow, of course, unless it's, something that is absolutely has to have done by the appraisal. But most of the time when we have repair requests, they give a credit in lieu of the...
Yeah, it's a very common practice.
Right. So now we only have a 0.5% on, that's not a lot of money. Right. That's $2,500 on a $500,000 deal.
Yeah, and if they come out with the injunction saying that sellers cannot pay the buyer's agent, the seller giving them a 2.5% credit, I think the courts will see right through that. Say, hey, you're trying to work around my injunction. Okay, and
sure.
So I can see the court coming back and say, no. Now we're saying that the buyers can pay the buyer's agent, the sellers can pay the seller's agent, and the two shall never mix. I could see that happening. Well, so let's say you're trying to buy a house, Amy, and you say, well, your commissions are negotiable. I said, yes, but this is what I charge. Well, I can't afford that. Well, then you either find another agent or you need to save some more money before you buy a house. If they make the buyer's agent to be paid by the buyer, a lot of buyers are going to have to pull back for a couple of years until it's usually not a small amount.
Well, or the buyer's agents just won't get paid that much.
Right. And so let's say you look at me and say, all right, I want to buy a $500,000 house. What's your commission, Mike? I say, I charge 2.5%. I'm good at what I do. But you find another agent that will do it for 6, and you find another agent who will do it for 2. Well, you have a choice. Do I want to pay $12,500? Do I want to pay $6,000? Or do I want to pay $2,000? My bottom line is you're going to get what you pay for. Maybe there's an agent out there that'll do a great job for you for $6,000, and you have the right to make that choice. All right. But I also have the right to say, I choose not to work for that amount.
Sure.
And I wish you only the best. And we can, it'll be a difficult, if I've helped several of my clients buy several homes during the course of the years. I have been their real estate agent, whether they're buying or they're selling. Now, if you're selling and buying, it's not going to make any difference because you're going to, if you use me and let's say we're selling your house.
Yes.
And we use me and I charge you 2.5%, you don't have to pay the buyers, right? But then you want to buy. Well, I want to use you too, Mike. Okay, well, I'm going to charge you 2.5%. So it's going to be the same net out of pocket to you if you use me to both buy and sell.
Right.
All right. Now, if you're just selling and never going to buy again, you're going to save some money. But again, you can talk to any real estate agent, whether you're selling, or you can talk to any real estate agent, whether you're buying. And the commissions are always negotiable. Now, I'm pretty firm on what I've been doing this for a long time, and I know what my time is worth. I know what my skill level is, my expertise. I also know I'm, been known to be, a person of pretty high integrity. And I know I can tell you this is what you're going to get when you have me right beside you.
Well, we were talking about this on the break, Mike. One of the examples that you gave on, why a buyer would want to hire a realtor in the first place. We were talking about Mather Field.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about an example of what you get when you have a buyer's agent that actually knows what they're doing and that's right by your side.
And knows the area.
And knows the area.
Because there's a housing development on the south side of Mather Airfield, in Rancho Cordova, and nice homes there, all right? But what you need to know that about 3 or 4 miles further south of that housing development is a rendering plant. A rendering plant is where they take care of dead carcasses. They burn them, and usually they burn them at night once or twice a week.
Right.
And if you have the wind coming from the south, that smell is not the most pleasant.
Especially when it's 110 degrees.
And you want to open your windows and have that delta breeze coming through, and there's that smell. So I'll have clients say, hey, I'd like to look at that development. Hey, nice development, but you need to know this. All right. I mean, there are pros and cons for every area, and have a realtor that knows those areas with the expertise can help you make the decisions that are good for you. I see I ran out of time again. So we're going to be right back after this break with more discussion. But if you have any questions you want to talk to me about, 530-431-8586. We'll be right back.
Trees